Anyway, here's the deal. I've been saying this for years. Ludwig should bring back the Imperial Lug for wood snare drums, for wood shell snare drums. Now, this is a Sonor 2005. It's a birch drum, but of course I had to install the lugs on this because the spacing. These are Leedy and Ludwig lugs, and this lug design was not designed by William Ludwig or his dudes. This was after Ludwig sold the company to a company called Kahn. They invented this, well, this particular, what they call Imperial Lug, this Art Deco. WFL, William Ludwig did have his own version. In my opinion, I think most people's, this is actually cooler. So anyway, William F. Ludwig, WFL / the Ludwig Drum Company got, when they bought the stuff back from Kahn in the mid-late 50s, they got this lug design back. Anyway, these are, they look identical to what you'll see on a Supraphonic that has a bead, okay? Like, you know, I do this all the time, people. What's the matter with me? Alright, like this, okay? This, of course it's covered with debris, okay, now you'll see that this lug is identical to this lug, okay, if you can see, okay, except this one, son of a buck, this one has the bead, okay. These lugs are off a chrome over brass Supraphonic that I had some extra of these babies lying around. I threw it on a 1970 lack of serial number acrylite. I always thought that'd look kind of cool, but I think I'm going to take them off there. Anyway, the spacing on the chrome over brass ones, the ones from the late 50s into the early 60s, is the standard Supraphonic spacing, which I believe is 2 inches, maybe 2 3/16. I forget. I know that's embarrassing here. I'm making a video on it, but to me that's beside the point. The point being that the spacing is wider than the original Imperial spacing, or at least that when Kahn merged Ludwig and Leedy together, the Imperial Lug was very popular on wood drums, especially a lot of marching drums they had. And that's where I got these lugs from. Anyway, I had to get these from a 1950s drum, because it's all that I could get that didn't have the bead. I guess what I'm trying to say is, so I couldn't get any samples from modern era because they don't have the bead, because Ludwig hasn't made any, which is the point of this video. Ludwig has to go back, in my opinion. They should definitely make the Imperial Lug for their wood shell drums. I mean, look at how cool looking that is. You know what I mean? Not that the classic bow ties aren't cool, but, you know, enough already. You know, I mean, look at that. Isn't that totally sharp? And again, the reason why I had to put on a Sonor drum is because there's no Ludwig drums that have the 2-inch spacing. It's all the 2 3/16. I think it's 3/16. If I keep saying that and I'm wrong, just, you know, bear with me. So I had to get a lot of the specs of the imported drums, Sonor and Tama, and I don't know about Yamaha, but Sonor, Tama, and Pearl. Usually the snare drum lugs are 2-inch spacings. So what I did is, I always love this Sonor drum, I must confess, because it's birch, and the finish is glued on. There's another pointer for drum companies. Anyway, so I had to put these particular 2-inch spacing early 50s Leedy and Ludwig drums, which are identical to the, which are the Ludwig Imperial Lug, and put them on this drum because the spacing was already there. You know what I mean? I could have arsed around with the Ludwig drum and narrowed the holes a little bit, but you know, what's the point? I wouldn't want to do that. So anyway, this is how it will look on Ludwig drums. Now these could be cleaned up a little, and there's an important thing to understand, is that when Ludwig switched from the heavy cast lug in the early 60s, which would have been this one, because when WFL bought the name back and the dies and stuff, when he made the Imperial Lug, he made them notched for the Supras, or well, the Super Ludwigs, what he called them. Anyway, but you'll notice, check this out, there's more. WFL Ludwig III, are you listening? This is actually how I talk, but when they make the videos, I have to tone it down a little bit. They stopped making the heavy cast lug. They changed the design of it a little. Do you see this interior piece here? You know, there's this one Art Deco-y, then this one, then the Grandpappy. Ugh. The inside one got bigger. So the spacing here, that's sometimes a clue to find a chrome over brass Supraphonic. It's a little pointer from me to you. is I've never seen a chrome over brass Super Ludwig that did not have these. Well, that's not true. There actually was one time. I should say I've never seen a alloy, early, aluminum alloy, crimp bearing edges, whatever, or not, with these lugs. So whenever a hinter is on, on eBay or wherever you're looking, if you see these lugs on a Superphonic, in my opinion, 99.9 repeating chance it's a brass drum. Anyway, Ludwig, bring them back. When you bring them back, whether you want to use this design, which is, I think, a little classier. I have 99 Superphonics here somewhere. Stand by. So here, this is my first Superphonic ever. Took the Ludwig sticker up. And anyway, see the difference here? All right, see this, of course, is pitted to heck. You know what I mean? So anyway, see this Imperial. Now it's, okay, do you see the difference? Do you see how big that is? Now it matters here nor there. Ludwig can decide themselves if they want to, technically speaking, I guess you could say too, is even this one, both of them are actually a little smaller. Not the main outside lug, but this one is a teeny bit bigger once they switch to the lighter cast lug. And you can definitely notice that the inside piece is definitely much longer. Again, a clue to finding a chrome or brass Supra. Anyway, whichever Ludwig design Ludwig wants to bring back, and they're more or less identical, I would bring back this one because I think it's classier. Anywho, Ludwig, bring them back, will ya? They're so sharp, it would do you wonders. It really would. I think it would be a great thing to do. I mean, you bring back the club dates, which is cool. You know what the cool thing about the club dates is too, Ludwig? Is that you do have this traditional sizes, 22 by 14, 9 by 13, That's great. I mean, it's about time that some of these companies on their lower line drums offer traditional sizes. That is actually, I think, the more brilliant thing to me about the club date reissue than even the concept of a club date. Because technically, I'm not a big club date guy. I don't like the center lugs. But anyway, although I have owned a kit or two, and they always did sound great. So I'll be contradictory there. Anyway, a quick aside, Ludwig. There was a company, and I think it was Pearl, back in the day. I don't know if they were Pearl yet. But they actually did make an exact copy of your Imperial Lug. And this is what it is. I think it came on the Starfinder or something kit. And on the tom-toms and the snare drums had these. Now you'll notice, check this out. You folks have never seen them before. I mean, look at that. Of course, back in those days, these companies used to just outright copy Ludwig and Rogers, and I mean, it's a shame. I mean, of course, the companies did away with it. So essentially, the only non-heavy cast 50s version of an Imperial Lug that would go on a wood drum is this example, which comes from a late 60s, I think early 70s Pearl drum. Now you can see them, and they look identical. This, of course, has the original Imperial Lug spacings. Not the wider one like we just showed you on the 1962 to present drums, which of course have the bead. So I guess conceivably I could have slapped these babies on here since it is a 2-inch spacing as well. But the thing about these is the cast metal is a slightly inferior quality. And not with these particular ones, but I've had actually, over the years you'll see a couple, I have seen a couple of these Starfinder drums. And I did swipe the lugs from them. But on another batch that I had, they did strip easy. The pot metal they use in these is much inferior to the Ludwig. Anyway, so Ludwig, it is conceivable for you to make an Imperial flat lug. This is more or less, except for the quality or the lack of quality of the metal, this is more or less identical to your Superphonic, modern Superphonic lug. It's a lug. It's lighter, except for the hole spacing, 2 inches versus the 2 3/16, but it does have the older thing. So this is essentially, I think, what Ludwig would make, but with better metal. More or less to the specs of the modern lug, which is lighter. But whether or not they want to choose the, this smaller space design or the modern one I just showed you. So this is essentially what Ludwig would make. And I called one time and I talked to somebody at the drum show, and then I also called the company, because I'm a pain in the butt to everybody and their brother. And they flat out said, oh, it'd be too expensive. And I thought to myself, I'm like, well, what would it cost, 100 G's? I mean, these guys, if they make all that stuff, and, if they make a lot of this metal and stuff in China anyway, just have it made there. At least have the dies made there, bring it back here, and then make the lugs here. You know what I'm saying? It could be done, guys. Anyway, there's another thing. And another thing. Son of a buck. Ludwig should, also, too, I had the idea, because I'm chock full of them, You know how now they have a 5-inch Supraphonic and then a 6.5. My left hand is out of whack today. I tell you guys I have that thing. Anyway, they have the 5-inch, which of course is here, and then the 6.5. You know, I had told Ludwig a couple times that it would be a great idea and a great marketing campaign to have, most companies, even for a long time, have had a 5.5-inch snare drum and a 6.5. And people will always call a Supraphonic a 5.5. You see it all the time. 5.5 by 14 or 5.5 by 14. It's always 5. Ludwig has always done 5 or 6.5. But instead of having a 5, you know, succumbing to everybody else's, you know, specs and offering a 5 and then a 5.5 and a 6.5, my great wacky idea is to have a 5 3/4-inch depth drum. So you'd have a 5-inch, a 5 3/4, and a 6.5. So essentially, of course, the 5 3/4 would be directly between the 6.5 and the 5. But that would do two things. You wouldn't be kowtowing to the, you know, to the common specs of, you know, 5.5 and 6.5. Ludwig would have an intermediate size between the two, or I should say a size, you know, a size between the 5 and the 6.5. But it would be 5 3/4 inches. And Ludwig could call it the 575. I actually said that. I think I posted on William Ludwig III's Facebook page. He befriended me after I asked for requests. God love him. He appears he's a great guy. I've never met him. So Ludwig, my idea: bring back the Imperial Lug for wood shell drums. Look at how smooth that is. Everybody would love you. You'd sell them by the metric ton, or since it's America, you'd sell them by the regular ton, the royal ton, or whatever ton we use. But also, then, my advice: get an intermediate size on a Supraphonic. A 5 3/4 inch would be awesome. Call it just the 575. Be like McDonald's with the Big Mac 40 years ago. You know, the 575. You'd sell them by the metric ton, or you know, the standard ton. And I know there's a lot of guys right now saying, "Wait, Ludwig did make a 5.5-inch by 14, you know, Supraphonic." They actually didn't. The Dunnett titanium one, or steel, I forget, I think it's titanium. You know, Ron Dunnett, wonderful guy, by the way. I think he's a great guy. Made a 5.5 and a 6-inch version of those, but those are not the Ludwig. Those are not the aluminum. Plus, they're 5.5. So anyway, Ludwig. So let's get back to my point that a 5 3/4 inch Supraphonic would be marvy. I think it would sound awesome. It would give a lot of drummers who normally play Pearl and Yamaha, and they've been, you know, spoon-fed that stuff their whole lives, a size that would be more or less comparable to the 5.5. But they'd also kill two birds with one stone, as they could have a big marketing campaign. 575. So I've been crying about that the past couple drum shows to the guys at the booth, and they look at me like I have two heads. So bring back the Imperial for wood shell drums, and my advice would be to offer a 5 3/4 inch Supraphonic. I think it would sound like $1 jillion. I'm going to make a bunch of other drum videos coming up here, so I just wanted to start with this. Again, look at that. Whoops, oops, sorry. Isn't that nice? Maybe it makes the drums sound better. You know what I'm saying? Well, of course, it doesn't sound as good as a Ludwig.